A North Korean fighter jet surged toward a US reconnaissance plane, missiles armed, cameras rolling. In less than 2 minutes, the jet was gone. No American casualties, no warning shots, just silence and a flood of intercepted data. The real weapon wasn't the missile that ended the duel, it was the invisible war happening across the radio spectrum. What exactly did the US discover in those 72 minutes that made North Korea's Air Force transparent overnight? Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. The morning sky over the Yellow Sea looked calm, but the crew inside the RC-135 rivet joint knew calm rarely lasted here. Their headsets carried faint Korean chatter, bits of coded instructions skipping through static. The aircraft's consoles glowed with shifting traces, every beep marking another pulse in the hidden contest between surveillance and secrecy. They were tracking a North Korean Sango, II submarine that had surfaced after 2 days underwater. The surfacing seemed routine, but within minutes, an unusual radar pulse came from the north. It wasn't from the sea, it came from an airfield near Pyongyang, sharp, clean, and far too strong. The operators recognized it instantly. A scramble alarm. A MiG-29 Fulcrum had just launched. Inside the rivet joint, the crew ran quick checks, distance, bearing, altitude, all within potential intercept range. The MiG's transponder stayed cold, no identification broadcast, just silence broken by an approaching radar echo. The mission commander called for a holding pattern, waiting to see how quickly the fighter advanced. Some operators wanted to pull back, but others argued the data was priceless. Every second the MiG stayed airborne meant more frequencies to log, more bursts to decode. In those tense minutes, the decision shifted from evasion to opportunity. They would stay, not to provoke, but to collect. At their altitude, the rivet joint flew smooth and steady, a slow-moving laboratory in the sky. Its Iland sensor pods scanned the airwaves, slicing through hundreds of signals. Within moments, they began sorting electromagnetic layers, radar sweeps between 9.7 and 10.1 gigahertz, and encrypted bursts repeating every 240 milliseconds. What looked like noisy spikes to most analysts unfolded into perfect patterns. The crew realized that every pulse coming off the MiG's nose cone revealed details about its targeting radar, software calibration, and reactor harmonics. It was the fighter's fingerprint, exposed in real time. Then, a shimmer streaked past the cockpit. 2 magnesium flares ignited less than 500 meters ahead, burning at roughly 2,000 degrees Celsius. The light cut across the sky and blinded several cameras for a moment. Inside, lenses auto-dimmed, screens washed out in white. For a few seconds, it felt like the MiG had locked on, until the radar analyst laughed. The pulse strength hadn't changed. It wasn't an attack. The North Korean pilot, unaware, had just handed over more data. The heat contrast from the flares, when measured against the MiG's exhaust signature, gave engineers the exhaust-to-radar correlation they had never captured before. The quiet tension settled again. Every sensor on the rivet joint kept tracking, logs filled with metrics, signal range, decay rate, echo return. The MiG turned broadside, circling like a warning, but with each rotation, its radar power rose by small increments. The analysts could tell the pilot was adjusting gain manually, trying to correct interference he didn't understand. Each correction exposed more system calibration data until the rivet joint mapped his entire radar operation cycle 6 seconds long, precise down to the millisecond. Across the cabin, someone marked a timestamp and transmitted a burst back to the USS Theodore Roosevelt. Within seconds, an encrypted reply confirmed another aircraft had joined the op, an EA-18G Growler 35 miles southwest. The Growler carried jamming pods, but for now, stayed passive, listening. The plan hadn't been announced aloud, but everyone on board the rivet joint felt it. Their quiet experiment had drawn new players. The air around them was still, yet the space between frequencies started to tense. The MiG held its path, unaware that the next phase of this encounter would unfold without a single visible move. The Growler was already closing in. Seconds after the Growler settled into position, the electronic duel began. The crew armed the ALQ-99 jamming pods, and within moments the surrounding air turned dense with artificial noise. No missiles flew, yet the conflict raged across invisible channels. High-frequency bursts filled the sky at microsecond intervals, flooding every radar band within reach. On North Korean consoles, the display of the MiG-29 dissolved into static haze. Its targeting symbols blinked out. Even the ground controllers at Pyongyang's radar station would have seen their scopes flare white, unsure where the rivet joint or the Growler actually were. The Growler's pods operated with ruthless precision. They didn't just block signals, they layered mismatched waveforms designed to mimic engine returns, ghost aircraft, and scrambled telemetry. As a result, the MiG's onboard systems received dozens of phantom contacts, false targets flickering all around it. The pilot responded by increasing radar output, trying to burn through the interference. Each power adjustment overheated the magnetron inside the fire control radar, a risk pilots knew but rarely faced in real combat. In under 30 seconds, maintenance indicators spiked. The radar dish began degrading from the inside out, while the jamming void thickened. Miles behind, the RC-135 rivet joint sucked in everything the chaos revealed. Every spike, echo, harmonic distortion, and scrambled code spilled into its storage banks. Streams of data poured across satellite uplinks to the USS Theodore Roosevelt. In real time, naval analysts aboard the carrier visualized the MiG's entire sensor pattern, down to the encryption timestamps. Terabytes of telemetry mapped out how the North Korean radar cycled through modes, how its warning receiver reacted to jamming, and even how the cockpit interface prioritized power distribution. What seemed to be electronic chaos from the outside was, to the rivet joint's crew, pure structure. Below the aerial clash, the Sango II submarine began reporting anomalies. Its sonar arrays suddenly picked up incoherent noise. Communication channels to shore stuttered, then dropped. The Growler's signal spillover had cascaded downward, flooding underwater systems with false echoes. The Sango's operators tried to compensate by recalibrating their sensors, but every fix worsened the distortion. By chasing the interference, they made themselves more traceable. American analysts later described it as turning the sea floor into a transparent screen. Back in the air, the MiG pilot struggled with what his instruments now displayed, ghost formations looping around him like a swarm. To his radar, there were 3 Growlers and a tanker-sized intruder trailing behind. He broke formation, dived low, then climbed sharply, each move feeding new readings to the jamming pods. The Growler crew recorded every reaction to calculate how North Korean avionics passed false data. Within seconds, they commanded the final deterrent, a single AMRAAM missile, fired with precision control from launch to impact 1.8 seconds. The radar return vanished instantly. Silence reclaimed the headset channels, but the rivet joint systems kept recording for several more minutes, collecting the post-engagement decay signatures. What they captured wasn't just the loss of one jet. They had extracted encryption keys, radar timing algorithms, and communication headers that decrypted months of previous North Korean transmissions. The files, later analyzed by the National Air and Space Intelligence Center, were valued at roughly $1.3 billion in technological gain, the price of rendering an entire radar network transparent. Among the operators, the realization set in quietly. The exchange hadn't been about air superiority, it had been about information dominance. No wreckage, no wreck to recover, only frequencies, data, and the silence left behind. As the Growler turned home, its heat signature melted into the horizon, and the crews aboard the rivet joint watched their screens fade back to steady green. The yellow sea seemed empty again, but under that calm surface, the aftershocks of those frequencies had already begun influencing command centers across East Asia, rewriting their air defense playbooks line by line. The 72-minute encounter proved that dominance in warfare now starts and ends with control of the spectrum. Before missiles launch or engines ignite, silence and signal already decide who wins. One vanished jet exposed an intelligence weapon more valuable than any bomb, built from information instead of explosives. Every pulse, frequency, and echo became ammunition. So where does that leave future conflicts? If one aircraft can collapse an entire defense grid using nothing but data, will the next great power clash happen entirely in code? Let me know in the comments. Does electronic warfare redefine what battle even means today?